All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being on this conversation with the Gen Z on money and finance. So thank you guys for being here. Can you take a few minutes to share with me your name and your age, and then maybe a little bit of your occupation as well, but so the audience can know your background a little bit. But here, most importantly, is dealing the conversation about money. So go ahead and share with me your name and your age.
My name is Perla, and I am 31 actually. I work here at CSP Financial as a client service assistant. And what else would you like to know, so Paul?
Oh, no, no, that's good. We're gonna start off from there and let's go with I forgot that you are a millennial.
Yeah, I'm a little bit over the Gen Z line, but I know everybody hates me for my youth.
Okay, good, good, good. All right. So go ahead, the next person, Liana.
Hi, my name is Liana Whitmer, and I am 23 years old, and I also work at CSP as the marketing manager.
Thank you. Go ahead, the next one, Kai.
Yeah, hey everybody. This is Kai Jacobs. I also work at CSP Financial Group. I am 24 years old and I work in the capacity of financial planning and client servicing.
Awesome. Next one, Ethan. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, hi. My name is Ethan Grinke. I'm also 23 years old. I work at CSP Financial as in the client or in the financial planning and client care side of things, as well as an investment advisor representative and insurance agent.
Awesome. Awesome. So, yeah, again, I want to really appreciate you guys for being on this conversation. I think the audience, the consumer out there needs to hear your thoughts and your view about money and finance and your concerns about what's going on in today's world as well, if we can get to that. But most importantly, we can get to all these questions here. So let's let me ask you the first question. Each of you, can you each share a little bit about your financial journey so far? What's, have been your biggest financial lesson or aha moment for you?
Well, growing up, my journey with money was I would work for chores to earn my money weekly. And my mom had a bank account where it wasn't an actual bank account, it was like a house, and it had three sections in it, and one section was for tithing, one was for saving, and one was for spending. So growing up, I always knew to separate my money in that way, but I would spend my money on ridiculous stuff, and I am more realistic when it comes to the my approach on life. And I knew growing up that, oh man, I don't want to spend and waste my money on ridiculous stuff that I'm never going to use. So when I first got my job, I didn't know what to do. So I called Charles, and after telling him everything, he set me up. So that's
Oh,
my short journey on money.
good, good. So you're pretty blessed that you know Charles from beginning of your working, times. What
Yeah.
about you, Perla? What is your financial journey so far?
I think the biggest thing in my financial journey was got in debt with student loans right away out of high school and really just did not have a strong understanding of finance. It was in the financial foundations course when we were, we get into all the different topics and we started talking about debt. And I think it was Charles that said something like, well, if you think debt is bad, like, yeah, that's how you're going to see things. And I did think debt was bad. Like, my parents were like, no, 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 no debt. They paid off their house very quickly, their first house. And then on their second house, they bought it outright in cash with their savings. And so for me, I always thought, like, no, 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 debt is not a good thing to have. And I felt like a lot of pressure because now I had debt. And so, right now I'm still paying it off, but I don't feel that pressure of, like I was saying, like I'm never going to get out of it. It's just something that I'm paying off. And, and I'm excited for when I do finish paying it off, but I know Like debt is not bad. And for me, that was a big, big thing. And thankfully, I don't have any credit card loans, but that's something that, I am just really aware of. Like right now, when I hear people in the news talk about credit card loans and, all of these things going on, like my awareness is so much bigger.
So thank you for sharing that. What about you, Kai? What is your journey so far? Aha moments.
Yeah. Well, I think really going back to childhood, things like that, my folks were definitely of the mindset of, you want something, you're going to go get a job and you're going to buy it yourself, right? So I started working when I was 14 and a half because that was the earliest I could get a job. And I was working as a busser and then a dishwasher. And that was not my favorite cup of tea, but it's kind of limited the kind of jobs you can get as like a 14-year-old kid, right?
Right.
So I worked, through my whole time during high school. And then, when I got out of high school, I got my first credit card. And I think that was really one of my biggest financial mistakes, if you will, I've ever made was really diving into the world of credit cards. But I didn't pay attention in personal finance when I was taking my personal finance classes, things like that. And, I went out and I maxed out a card and I got another card. I maxed out that card. I maxed out another card. So, then here I am. I max out like 3, 4, 5 cards. I take out a consolidation loan. Then I remax out the cards. Then I repeated that process enough times where I had racked up probably somewhere between 10 and 15,000's worth of credit card debts that I now had as obligations between loans and credit cards. And then a couple of like payday loans, which if anyone's ever dealt with payday loans, they're pretty brutal. They're a little predatory. They charge 200-300% interest because they can.
Wow.
And that was pretty nasty. And I was just kind of struggling through it. I was just trying to survive through it, both paying those and then trying to pay all my bills and do that. And that was what kind of created part of my mindset to always keep pushing harder and harder for new opportunities, things like that. I found myself managing a T-Mobile store at 21, right? And that was a pretty awesome experience to get to be a store manager and hire my own team and do all that. And that was really cool and really unique. And I was still struggling with the debts and things like that. And then I came out here. Actually, I met Charles out in Arizona. I know I'm sure Charles gets some credit for that. And I met you as well, so Paul. And we had some conversations and I started to figure out a game plan and got out of it. Now I'm still dealing with, some of the ones I defaulted on, and that'll be another 5 years or so that'll stay on my credit. But, at this point, I'm not too worried about it. It's in better shape. I handled what I could. I defaulted what I couldn't. And, I learned a pretty good life lesson, and it creates the ability, to relate to people that are going through that financial hardship when you dealt with it firsthand, so
Yeah.
yeah.
You did good. And oh my gosh, 200 something percent that they charge you. That's a loan shark right there.
That's those payday loan companies because they get away with it because it's just like,
Oh
it's
my goodness. I cannot imagine. Seriously, this
wow.
should be criminal.
Yeah.
Something like that, it should be criminal. Yeah. So what about you, Ethan?
Oh boy, I'm sure I can't top Kai's story there. Didn't know that about you, Kai. Wow. Yeah, my story, I mean, a little bit similar starting out. I mean, my parents and everything were about the same attitude on things, and it's the biggest thing I remember my dad telling me was to live within your means, because that's how he was able to make it to where he's at. So I actually didn't start working until I was about 16, and I wanted to get a car and pay for those things. So went right into full-time work in the summer, which was quite a jarring experience, going, from not working to full-time. But then I started working and I started getting some money. And then I had always a little bit of an interest in investing. I was about 12 when I first started looking into investing and how to buy shares. And I realized, I can't do that yet. But then right about 17 and a half, I had opened my first investment account, custodial, of course. I couldn't open one myself yet. And I was really into like day trading, penny stock trading, and things like that. So I was doing all kinds of trying to make it big, like all these guys on the internet say you can make millions doing that. Well, didn't work out that way. Didn't I won a little bit, lost a little bit, and kind of left it at that. But I
Oh,
knew
wow.
after playing around with it for a bit, I'm like, I really enjoy this. So I wanted to look for a career that involves investing. And so that kind of led me down the path of looking at what I could do with it. And then as I got into later in high school and early college is when I kind of figured out I really like working with people as well. So then that kind of led to me finishing out college and everything else, and then wanting to become a financial planner slash investment advisor on that side of things. Um, but otherwise, yeah, just worked and did everything along the way on that, but pretty straightforward. That's how I got here.
Thank you for sharing that. That's good. At least each and every one of you have a little bit of different background. Is really good to hear. So do you think that your generations, when it comes to your financial freedom, do you feel your financial success, what does it mean to you? How do that different from the generation before you when it comes to financial success, and financial freedom? How is that different from the generation before?
I want to go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the biggest difference I see is I can recognize that I am empowered by my finances. Whereas the previous generation, so my mom and dad, I remember very distinctly, I saw them go through stress and pressure of, how to pay off their house, how to make the bills, how to pay off the bills. And I remember, we had this big kitchen dining table, and there was stacks of paper that it was always covered with papers. I think I want to say it was like Friday or Saturday night. It was not uncommon where there was all this paper on it, and it was all of their bills were laid out, and they were strategizing how they were going to pay the bills, what was going to get paid first, where they were going to be putting their money. And I remember it being a really stressful experience for them. And money was always something that was seen as limited. For me, right, I can really see like I'm always looking for the opportunity of, where can I make a difference with my money, with other people's money? Like, how can I empower myself and how can I empower others? So the conversation has a completely different tone. And thankfully, I have the tools around me to where I am in that place. And so I try to share that with as many people as I can.
Thank you for sharing that, Perla. So what about Kai? Can you share a little bit about that? Like what's different? I'd like to know, that because your parents also in the financial industry as well. So I like to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think, of course, my parents themselves divorced when I was pretty young, and even both the two sets of parents, I think, have a very different mindset around money, right? I mean, growing up, my mom and my stepdad, they were very, I would say, quiet about money. There was very much that world of, we don't talk about it. The example I always give people when I'm asked, what's your earliest childhood memory around money? I give them the example of like sitting at the dinner table, the check comes for the meal, right? And they're looking at it and they're like, you look at the check, you pay for the meal. And that was the rule of thumb, right? Like you don't look at things, you don't snoop, you don't do that kind of thing. So there was very, very little discourse in that regard. Whereas on my dad and my stepmom, my dad's dad had passed away very young when he was 18. And I think that was something that always impacted him when it came to his relationship with money. I don't feel like he ever felt like he got the context or the lessons from his dad per se, right? Is how he would always describe it. And I think that was pretty impactful to his mindset. And he's someone who, I mean, he's a real trooper. I mean, he will put on a hard hat and he'll march in and he'll keep working and hustling. I know when I see them struggling and they're having a hard time making ends meet sometimes, and it's tough to watch, it's tough to watch, but it's like one of those things where he's really opposed to the dialogue, the outside help, So even though they both came from different backgrounds, both all four parents, they all are very quiet around that. I think looking at money today and transferring that into today's generation, I think that silence is gone to an extent, right? I mean,
Good.
now we live in this world where, everything's online, you got TikTok and Instagram and Reddit and whatever else, right? And people are always posting their thoughts, the quick, easy hacks to make money, how they feel about their money, their losses, their wins. And I think it starts to open up this discourse where people are more open to the idea of talking about money. And I don't think it's so secretive where, that it's like hush hush. I think people are more open to if someone on the street asks you, like how much you bought that thing for, you're going to be more open to just say it where, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, that maybe wasn't the case, right? You don't snoop in other people's business. It's a totally different, mentality, I think, nowadays.
Yeah, you are so right. I mean, I am a Gen X, so I have to learn how to share. Actually, the conversation how to share is, it's stuck right here, right at my neck, where when it comes to money, right? And I'm so grateful this new generation about the Gen Z, the millennial, the younger millennial. You guys are so open to share in either about money, about your thought, how you feel, everything. I'm just so grateful. You actually, for me, I learn a lot from Gen Z and because of your sharing. I learned to be more freer around the conversation about anything. So thank you. Thank you for your generation to be such an openness and an open mind to learn and to share your feelings, share your thought, because it's where you can learn about anything from other person, and we can correct our way how to deal with life from there. If you don't share, you're really not going to get anything out of that. And so you guys taking a stand, not just for your generation, but for my generation and maybe possibility even generation before that, the baby boomers, they even more scared to share. So that's lead us to, I mean, Ethan, do you have anything to share about that?
I definitely agree with a lot of what Kai said on just our generation being a lot more open. I mean, even me with my own friends, we're a lot more open on what, if we bought something, what about what it costs, or like bought a new vehicle or something like that. And even just myself, I'm a lot more open about my finances if someone's asking from a more of a genuine place or wanting to learn in some way, not just because. But the one thing I was going to say is, yeah, social media definitely has an impact on that and how open people are being with their finances. But the one thing I've even noticed working with other Gen Z clients is that the one possibly negative side is that people get wrapped up in these timelines or things that they want or need to have in order to be successful or to feel comfortable with their finances, that they need to be making, $100,000 a year, or they need to have or be driving this type of car or things like that. So it's just when I've gotten into those conversations with my Gen Z clients, I remind them, there is no set timeline that you have to have certain things done by at any time. It's all on your own timeline, whatever makes you comfortable and empowers you.
Yeah, that's good. There's no timeline here. I think Gen Z you have a lot of time, but then you don't have time. So if you're a Gen Z listening to this, the only thing that keep you from being poor is taking action. So, you have asked me, how do I get here? And I want to see what is what's inside your mindset that, occurred to you when you compare your success to my generation success.
Yeah, well, when I asked that question, I was just so curious. I'm just so inspired by, everything that you and Charles have not just created, but everything that you guys share, right? You guys have shared all of those challenges with us. And And I think that's something that I do appreciate about this time that we're in. People talk about manifesting a lot, right? And so like manifesting that for myself and living that experience of like, wow, here, like I'm gonna be here. Like, what is that gonna feel like for me? You know, the sense of accomplishment and I guess that is something you know, I don't know because I'm not part of that generation, so I don't know how much manifesting and you know like creating was really talked about in other generations, but I know that that's something big, especially with like, I mean, we've already talked about it, like, you know, all the social media, like people love talking about manifesting and their different rituals and so I think it's such a unique time for all of us where we're especially just given our different ages here, like we are so young and like how you were saying, we definitely have time, but we also don't have time to waste because there's so much that we want to create. I want to say it this way, it's a gift from other generations, from your generation, so Paul, that we can even like be making these plans, you know, and to whoever's listening, like they can borrow whatever's going to work for them and see what we have to offer to get them fulfilling that plan.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you in that. So what about, and Ethan, do you have anything around that area of comparison of your challenges to millennial or to the Gen X like myself?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I look at older generations and I look at folks today, and it's tough, you know, because I don't want to make anything that would be considered like a blanket statement, right? Like I don't want to put everybody into one box, but I think looking out there and in the people I talk to, I think in today's younger crowd, I see a lot less where they want to take responsibility, where they're really hungry, where they're really out to take the actions that are going to find them succeed. Um, you know, a great example is like when I did have that opportunity to run my own T-Mobile, right? And I brought on a staff of people, some of which were people, you know, I had no connection to, some were people that I had called friends in the past, right? And I had a friend that I had hired on because I thought he was a good worker, right? I thought he was a dependable guy. I thought he was straightforward. And then there was this other guy I had in the mix with me who started with me, didn't know the guy at all. And it was me and him in the trenches. We're pushing 70-hour work weeks every single week, open to close. We're both learning the store, we're running the store. And it was just the two of us for those first like month or two every week. And then we brought on that third guy, my buddy, and he was like, you know, anything that cost him time, you know, he was there from like 9 to 4. If he was there a minute after, it's a no-go. If he was there a minute early, it was a no-go. You know, if he had to come in on a day he didn't really want to come in, it was a no-go. You know, he wasn't really hungry. If he was missing on a metric, you know, because we had, you know, 5, 6 metrics we had to close every month. If he was short on maybe his accessory attachment, you know, he didn't care. He was like, you know, I want the money, but I don't want to work that hard for the money. I think it's very common to see in this generation where they don't want to work that hard. They just want to see the result without taking the steps to get there. And that was really clear to me from that experience. And I think that's what, you know, looking towards older generations separates them from the pack a little bit, right? You see a lot online where I think you see a lot where young people complain about the cost of goods, the increase of inflation, yada, 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 right? But you look back and sure, you still, you know, the wages were lower. People still had to work, they still had to earn things. And I think there was a drive and a hunger back then that really isn't quite as present in today's conversation, personally. And
Yeah.
that would be kind of my take there, you know, and I think that's something that if you really want to find that success, you have to really want it and you have to take the action. I mean, words are nothing without action, right? So
That's right.
I think that would be my take there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You know, your backgrounds from your working hard, you know, work ethics, it's create the character that you have today. It's separating you from all the, others. You see, that's what make you the kind of person that you hear today. I want you to notice that. That's separating you right there, right? And there's not many Gen Z at your age, Kai, I can say that, as responsible and, go-getter and take responsibility to learn and take on the task that this gonna help yourself, but also help other as well. That's what I'm so appreciative of you, and being a part of the CSP team. I'm so grateful that you are here. And you don't back down either. You basically when the challenge is there, you're like you took on the challenge, and I watch you, grow through that. It was fun to watch in a way. It is sometime I think on your end you probably like feel the pain, but it's kind of fun for us to watch because we saw you, we saw you struggle in some part, and then but I see, when you able to overcome that step, you really understand who we are, and that what we were looking for, and I think that if you go through life without having any kind of challenges that in front of you that you don't overcome, then you have to do that over and over and over. And the best part is to face your challenge head on and overcome it, and then you see yourself to the next level.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thank you, Sopal.
So thank you. And then what about you, Ethan? What is your comparison?
Well, I kind of echo again what Kai was saying on there are definitely some people out there who just like to expect the results without putting in the hours or time necessary. Now, I mean, I've been lucky myself that most of my friends and people that I've associated with were the go-getters and hard workers, and they're all in really successful careers now at this time. So it's that's definitely helped. But I think with each generation, there's different challenges and different things that they have to face. So you did touch on it. The costs and expenses are kind of higher for our generation today than they were back then, even adjusted for inflation. But that's the challenge. That's what we're gonna have to face. There's no point in kind of sitting here and complaining about it. You're just gonna have to step up and take it on. The biggest thing that I've noticed with at least Gen Z is, especially again, I think it's due to social media and things like that. There's just so many things that people put their money or like throw their money at and spend their money on that are a lot of wants and not needs. And it kind of makes me just think again what my dad had said when I was younger is like you got to live below your means. It doesn't mean that you're living on beans and rice and never doing anything, but it also means not upgrading to a brand new cell phone every year or buying a fancy new car all the time or things like that.
Yeah, that's a good share. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, the difference I can say is that, your younger generation, millennial to Gen Z, that a lot of impacting them is that they live in a prosperity world, right? They're living in a good time, unlike myself. I came here at the age of 14 years old picking blueberry because I couldn't, I'm not legal to work. So I picked blueberry to make some cash, in the blueberry field. And that was hard work. Talking about, staying in a little apartment and then waking up, 5 o'clock in the morning, get ready to get on the bus to the blueberry field by 7 o'clock to go to work, So that's and work until 7 at night, and then come back and then do it again and over for 3 summer long until I was legally work. And my first job was at Wendy's selling hamburger, and then I was a master at salad bar. So that's again, working is create good working ethic, create good character. It's I would never take that away from my kids, from anybody. if I see them working, actually, I love to watch that. It build their character, but they don't know it. A lot of kids, they want their life to be easy. If they're living their life easy now, I promise you, when they're a little bit older, it's going to be a lot harder because they've been training themselves to be easy. And they get so used to be easy, to have that easy life. And so when hard time come, they cannot handle that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So be thankful for where you at. You can struggle now, but later on, because you guys are on the right path, later on, you're gonna have such an amazing life. And when I'm saying that, just look at us so far. You can learn from us with a condensed, compressed time frame. Instead of 30 years, you can take this to 10 years, and that's how much time you can compress this journey by learning from people before you who are willing to give that wisdom and knowledge to you. Okay, so the next question here, what do you think is the most important financial lesson that young people should learn today?
I mean, first thing that came to my mind was how to save and needs versus wants. I mean, I think the biggest one is a lot of people our age just kind of spend everything that comes in and never really think about the future. And I often get the kind of joking response from the people like I talk to like that. It's like, oh, I just plan to die young, or I'm not going to live that long anyway, so I don't need to save for it. But I just think that's not very prudent and not a very good long-term strategy, especially when you are to that point. And it's like, then what?
So what about you, Liana? What is when it comes to the importance of financial lesson for the younger people should learn today?
Well, I was thinking about, man, if I could do things differently. I wish that I was more like Kai and Ethan and got a job when I was younger to make money first before thinking about what to do with it. Is I think our younger generation is, needing to learn that work ethic to make money, and then we can decide what they want to do with it, and obviously not spend it on just anything that social media throws at you, but look up to people that you want to become and focus on your own journey and not compare it with anybody else's financial journey.
Yeah, good. Thank you. What about you, Perla?
Oh my gosh. So the two things that I wish I had done a little earlier was opened a Roth IRA, because I had a job at 17, but I was definitely not saving it. I was buying things that I wanted and not things that I needed. And so I would have opened a Roth IRA, and I would have, just started saving more earlier. And especially with that strategy of using a Roth IRA and, getting a financial advisor and, just like really stepping into that world. I think the thing that used to stop me was that, I didn't know anything about it. And so I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't even know who to go talk to. And, and the people that I did hear talking about it were people that were way older than me. And I felt like there was no relatability. So I would be looking for somebody to help guide me with my money way, way earlier.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes. What about you, Kai?
Yeah, I think I really would echo a lot of the thoughts shared so far. I think everything Ethan and Liana and Perla were saying around, needs versus wants, and really starting to create that drive and that work ethic. And it's a really true conversation. I definitely made some tough choices. I don't know, I'm sure some of you guys have watched Parks and Rec here. I always loved Aziz Ansari. He plays a character on Parks and Rec. His whole motto was treat yourself. And I always told myself, oh, you got to treat yourself, and then I'd go out and I'd get whatever I wanted to eat, or I go buy whatever I wanted to buy. It's so easy to get wrapped up in that mindset of just treat yourself and like have fun and not think about, okay, great, yes, treat yourself, but how do I also start thinking about the future? How do I make sure I'm not overspending and actually having like a good idea of what's going on? Otherwise, you find yourself in a position, like I found myself where I kept treating myself till I was in a bunch of credit card debt, and that's not a position anybody wants to be in.
Yeah, yeah, thank you for sharing that. So authentically share because people need to hear that if they in a similar situation, they know a place to find help. We give a lot to the consumer. We invest a lot of education's platform to give away to people. So, definitely CSP advisor know exactly what they need to do and what they can do to help people who in need of those information, how to get out of that debt and how to get started, and that's one thing I'm so proud of you guys, beginning your journey with us. And our platform is not to get rich quick, For us, it's not that kind of mindset or that kind of heart. We truly a company that help people from all walks of life, from any income level, if they want to learn it. So, and thanks you guys for doing that, for being on the same journey to do that. So thank you. And I know we talk a lot about social media, how it impact the view on money and finances. So do you have any influencer out there that you look at, you snoop in to see, and then you follow them on their financial advice?
Oh, I mean, I can go first. Especially before I got involved with CSP or anything that way, the biggest influencer that I followed was Dave Ramsey by far.
I think most church, yeah. The church really pushed Dave Ramsey, Yeah, he have a really good platform from getting you out of debts. But
Mhm.
then when you pass that stage, when you become successful, where would you go next to really make your money works for you, right? And I think that part where he just stopped. And so we have a better extension for that, for that platform. So I'm grateful that you say that.
A quick add-on to that too is the difference between just never being in debt and keeping yourself responsible that way versus like what we talk about, being that legacy creator, wealth builder, things that way.
There you go. Thank you. Anybody else want to share your influencer before we move on to the next questions?
Sure. I don't know that I've ever really followed anybody from a financial influencer standpoint, but I do enjoy a lot of the like entrepreneurship. I totally butchered that word. Entrepreneurship type of mindset folks, listening to folks like Alex Hormozy, where he talks about, creating businesses and like building, your client connections, things like that. I think there is some really cool resources, and there's a lot of really cool free videos and things like that. And I think mostly what I'm attracted to is that mindset in those kind of people that are hungry and want to find that success.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I used to listen to a lot of Dave Ramsey also. But I've graduated from the school of Dave Ramsey now. I don't listen to him anymore. I do like to listen to it for the stories and like some of the people that he talks to. So more for entertainment, if ever. But as far as managing my money, who I listen to is going to be my financial coach, my coaches, because there's so many of us around here. Yeah, I don't know that I can say that I listen to anybody else.
Oh, wow. I'm surprised that you guys didn't say anything about school. Like you didn't learn anything from your school at all, None. Like Zippo at your age, 20, 23, 24, 31, right? You didn't learn anything from school? Oh my goodness.
I took personal finance in high school and it was the bare bones basics. Like it really wasn't teaching you much about anything other than how like a checking account works, how to write a check, that kind of thing. That's about
Oh
it.
my goodness. Wow. Yeah. So, what financial topic do you wish to hear?
Well, definitely a little bit more about just general adult life and what it all entails. How to, um, yeah, how to save money, how to manage your expenses, keep track of what your bills are going to be. How a credit card works is a big one. 'Cause a lot of people don't know how like getting a loan works, auto loans, getting a mortgage, things like that. Um, yeah, how the different general investment account works. So like for most people, it's gonna be like a 401k or a Roth. So explaining how those works, how the match works, making sure to take advantage of that. Just a lot of general information. I think like that should be covered in that type of class or scenario.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we have 8 weeks course, right? That cover all of those area of what you just talked
Oh,
about.
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, because we have the financial foundations. Honestly, if we can put that into classrooms, there you go. You got it covered right there.
Mhm. Yeah. So how do you know what is good financial advice compared to what is good and what is bad advice? Kai, maybe you want to touch on that?
I think, in my opinion, I guess you got to check it for yourself. I mean, I think there's a lot of voices, with us living in such a digital world. It's easy to jump on a thread on Reddit, say, and you look at some threads on there. I'm sure you guys are familiar with. If you guys aren't, there's stuff on there like Wall Street bets, right? And you see people place bets on Wall Street, like, oh, I did a $20,000 put on, whatever stock, Tesla, I don't know, right? And it's easy to look at that and be like, oh, that's where money making's at. But then you do some research and you really bounce that idea off people, and I think people tend to say no. So it's easy to look at that digital world and think that that's sound advice. So I think you do have to do some independent fact checking. I think talking to people that are close to you and talking to people that you view as mentors or role models in that way, people that you feel like have found some success in that manner. And then really making a good decision for yourself that's based off of facts and not just opinions of other people, right? Because that's a slippery slope when we get into opinions. So
Mhm.
that would probably be my thought there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up on Wall Street. Wall Street, it's so exciting area of like they keep ringing the bell when the stock is up and they make it so exciting. So if younger generation they get caught in that movement, they're gonna make some bad choice, a lot of bad choices. Because we know the stock market is constantly go up and downs and we don't know exactly when it's up or when it's down. So the good part is to have a financial sound from science and academics, of what you guys are getting here.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree. There's a big history of world and research and science and all of that out there. It's a matter of finding it and going out and looking for it, and I know it's easy to get caught up, at least as a young person myself, where some of that you might think it just doesn't even apply to me. It's like it's tough to put into scope. Like I remember I did have a personal finance class in high school. I took a college finance class through like a dual enrollment, and I still didn't learn anything in that class. Like because it's so. Even though I'm learning it and I'm answering questions, it's not like tangible to my own personal situation. Like I'm like, well, how much of this knowledge do I really ever need? And, it goes in one year, out the other year, right? So I think there's some value too to not only doing that research, but also finding a way to, whether it's working with someone else or doing the research and applying it yourself, really being able to find a way to tailor it to your personal situation, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so what apps do you use to save your money and also what motivate you to save?
I actually use the app Rocket Money, so you can link all of your checking and savings accounts to there, and you can kind of track all your transactions and expenses. So I do pay the annual subscription for that, just so I can keep a better eye on where my money's going. And as far as saving goes, my philosophy on this has always been a bit out of the ordinary, but I pretty much just have my um, paychecks come in and it goes into savings, and then I really only buy something every so often when it's something that I have either I kind of in my own mind put, saved for or planned for. But otherwise, I really haven't really always been a big spender. So it really everything just kind of went to savings, and I build it that way.
That's a good habit, Ethan. Yeah. Anyone else want to share about that? What motivate you to save and and what apps do you use?
So I use Bank of America for my checking and savings accounts. They have a budget tool within their app, which is very, very handy, which I enjoy. And they have a very easy to use website as well. So I go online and I actually have set up my savings like I just do like every paycheck, a certain amount is going to go into my savings. I have two savings accounts. Very intentional because what motivates me is going to be my loved ones. So I want to make sure that my parents are taken care of and that my pets are taken care of. So one savings account is actually a dedicated emergency fund for my pets. And yeah, and just a little bit gets set aside every paycheck, and I don't have to look at it. I don't have to think about it. And if it's not in my checkings account, then it's fine. It's money that never existed as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, and then to see it, just accumulate, is definitely a feeling of accomplishment as well because I know I'm doing well. Yeah, and then another app that I have enjoyed is the Dave Ramsey Every Dollar app, to just create the budget. And so, maybe like once a quarter, I just make sure that, if there's been any changes or, if I need to make any adjustments. So I try to use all of the tools available to me.
Okay, good, good. What about you, Liana? You have any of that?
I don't personally use any apps, but I do set aside a portion of my paycheck into savings, and then basically if I don't see it, it's not there either, and I try not to touch it at all. And my monthly expenses are pretty regular, so I check it at least once a week just to make sure that my expenses are within the budget range that it usually is every month, and then I just pay off my credit card every single month. So there's no app that I use, but I do look at it very frequently. And I know every time I make a purchase, I just do the math in my head of like, okay, what did I spend already? And then just add to that and make sure that I'm within my spending limits. And then what motivates me for saving is definitely the lifestyle that I want to live. And I am not a big spender anyways, so it makes it easier in that case. But yeah, I want to save for my future, save for the future family that I want to have. And then obviously making sure that I can live the lifestyle that I want and making sure that I can help build generational wealth starting with me.
Good, good. Thank you for sharing that. Kai, do you have anything to share about that?
Yeah, sure. Funny enough, I actually use the same budgeting app that Ethan does with Rocket Money. I do like how it tracks my recurring subscriptions and purchases and all those kind of things. So it gives me a good target number every single month for what my baseline is. And then I also use an Excel spreadsheet that I've created where I take all the data I got from there and then I plug it into that to cross-reference to get my exact total. So that gives me my baseline expenses. And then I also have segmented bank accounts. So I've got my regular checking. I have a business one, which isn't really a business checking, but I use it for business expenses, the savings account, and then I opened up an account in an entirely separate bank for, fun money, things like that. Because even though I've learned all those lessons, sometimes I still have a hard time with wants versus needs. So I segment out just a small chunk of cash that goes into a totally separate bank that I make that allowable for myself to, go buy I don't know, video game or something like that, right? And that money's totally separate, and it goes towards my personal expenses for fun stuff, and then everything else gets broken out between those other accounts. And that's generally been a strategy that I've found has been working lately. It's taken time and modification to find out, what works, because I think what works for one person, it doesn't necessarily work for the next person. It just matters on how it works for you at the end of the day, whatever you find successful for saving money and building up a nice savings account. I think couple things that really motivate me are, number one, never finding myself in a position I found myself in before, where I was in debt and struggling, having a 3 month savings as a cushion is a feeling of reassurance, right? And not thinking, crap, what if this month's a total wonky month or something crazy happens and you're not ready for that. And then also, that feeling of, how can I tell somebody to do something that I don't believe in and I don't adhere to, and I'm not saving for my future and I'm not doing that. So if I'm not doing that, what right do I have to tell somebody else to do that? So I think there's some of that feeling of, also adhering to my own principle from that standpoint and having a strong set of principles there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a good one. Yes, you cannot do something for, others without doing it yourself, right? You gotta, when you cook, you had to eat your own food. So yeah, I know that we in CSP here, we don't invest in cryptocurrency, right? We don't advise our client to invest in cryptocurrency. But just to be curious, did you guys invest in any of that?
I did once. There was I think I had, what was it? It was an app. I want to say it was Cash App, and they built in, you could buy crypto, and this was way before CSP. This was a very long time ago, and so and so I bought a little Bitcoin. I made no money, and I just remember like watching it go up and down, and it was too stressful. So I took my money back out of that, and I think I lost money on that. But yes, at one point I did do that.
Well, thank you for that. Ethan, do you have
Yeah,
purchased?
yeah. So before I was with CSP, doing the whole day trading and stock picking, all that, of course, crypto gets into there in some shape or form. Had ended up putting about probably close to $1,200 of my own money at one point into various cryptocurrencies, and got really into, because each crypto coin, has its own like purpose and its own projects or things that it's working on. So I got really involved with one, and they said, oh, it's going to be growing so well, and here you can get this kind of interest on it, and yada yada. So did that, and I think that coin was about $4.50 at the peak back in like 2019, 2020. And since you just asked the question, because I did pull my money out of there eventually, after of course losing about half the value on it. Yeah, now it's worth about half of a cent from $4.50. So it really didn't end up going anywhere. And if you kept your money in there, and locked it up for the 5 or 10 years that they were offering, you would have lost all your money. So I'm kind of
Wow.
glad I got out of that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So now, since you've been with CSP, you have learned about the science and academics of investing, very sound advice. So how do you compare yourself to, how do you compare yourself as a person who know that information to the people who at your age, around your age group out there who are so into crypto and, and other stuff out there, which I don't even know what it is. Um, NFT, I think that's what they call it, right?
Yeah, and yeah.
That's their
Uh,
crypto trend. So how do you think, what is the advice that you can give to them from your experience?
um, well, and it's actually funny because I just had this experience with the market being how it is the last few days. I am not one to typically check the market as soon as it opens every single day. I'll kind of see how it's doing through client accounts, or I'll check it. But I have a few friends that still like to stock pick or buy different cryptos and things like that. So I wake up yesterday morning with a message from my friend asking what should he do because the market's down, and the
Mm.
stocks that individual stocks he was invested in were down 10 or 15% already. Um, and I tried to give him the same advice of to follow the academics, globally diversify if you're going to be invested. Otherwise, if you're doing anything else than that, recognize that it's a gamble. And they're like, no, I think I got this. Or in his case, he told me his uncle knew some, I guess, information about these energy stocks that he had invested in and how they were going to do very well. Well, they're not. So that would be my advice: is if you want to be invested, you got to follow the academics and what the actual data says. Anything other than that is a gamble, and you really got to recognize that that's what it is, and that you could lose all of your principal on that.
Yeah, yeah. And to add on to that is have a coach, right? What Perla mentioned earlier about having a coach to help you to identify what is a good investment and what is bad investment. And then
Absolutely.
yeah, and then your biases is probably the biggest hurdle to go through, because you tend to want something very quick, and you see the excitement and where the excitement is at. What about you, Kai? From your as a young advisor with CSP.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to get caught up in that conversation, just like Ethan was saying around stock picking. I had a buddy. I remember when we turned 18, and right around the time I was turning 18 was when like Robinhood was really coming out and was really popping off, and they were giving, I don't know if you guys remember, but they were giving out like a free stock if you signed up and bought other stocks with them. And I had a buddy who went and bought like, a bunch of different random stocks that were all companies he liked, Spotify and a couple others, Amazon, I think. Um, and he was loving it. He was up big. He was just crushing it. And then I remember, several years later, we get into kind of that whole weirdness with the COVID time frame and things like that, and those things taking a dip, and then him selling everything and ultimately selling at a loss, over what he'd even originally bought those stocks for, over a course of multiple years. I think it's easy to get caught up in that conversation, just like we've talked about with social media, things like that. I think the real prudent thing to do is immerse yourself in that education in the world, when it comes to building portfolios, and making sure, just like Ethan mentioned, you're diversified, that you're getting into things that are low cost. You're not paying crazy expense ratios. That's something a lot of people overlook. Um, I was just looking at a money market fund that somebody was inside of their 401k this morning, that was a 0.42 BIP expense ratio, and that, I mean, for reference, that's like 0.5% of that money market account. Whatever the gain is on that, that's just getting eaten in a fee, so that's like crazy, to not even have that knowledge. A lot of people don't. I think if you're not taking the time to get educated around, expense ratios, diversification, prudent asset classes, how to build a diversified portfolio, I think it becomes a lot easier to think, it's easy to pick a stock and win and succeed. And, there's something unquantifiable in the success or loss of a stock, right? A lot of people call it luck, and that comes down to whether you believe or don't believe in luck, right? But whether it's luck or bad luck or something just totally unquantifiable, there's no real history of success or track record that's proven in that world, right?
Yeah, so from hearing what you're saying, do you think the Gen Z need financial planning and financial advisor?
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't even know what a Roth IRA was when I like first started here. Like I knew of its existence, but like I didn't know what quantified a Roth, a traditional, a TOD. I talked to people just yesterday. I was on a call with some folks, and I was actually talking to their son about starting a Roth IRA and starting to go through some of that world of financial planning. He just turned 18. And I think that's perfect. That's the time to be getting into financial planning, when things are fresh and just starting out. And then, some had come up on the concept of like a non-qualified brokerage account, TOD, that kind of stuff. And, you know, even the parents weren't really familiar with what a non-qualified account was, and then having to break that down. It's not something I think people are ever formally taught. It's almost kind of like street knowledge in a way, like one of those things you learn out and about through life experience. But I think the sooner you can get that knowledge at a younger age and set yourself up, I mean, you're opening yourself up to that power of compounding interest. every conversation I ever chat with anybody over 40, they're like, oh man, if only I'd learned about this when I was 20 years old, right? Because then you got your whole life, you compound interest, you can save a lot less and have time work for you instead of, having to go and play catch up at, 60, 65 years old and try and prep for retirement when it's just 2, 3 years out, right? So it is powerful to start young.
Good, good. Thank you for sharing that. So what does financial independence means to you, and and what are you going to do to take the step to achieve that? So let's start with Leona.
I think financial independence to me is being able to stand for myself, like not go to my mom and dad for things or go for them for help, knowing that I can support myself. And then how I am achieving that is saving money and then putting aside things for retirement down the road. So doing what I need to do, even if that means sacrificing my lifestyle now.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Sacrifice. Yep. All right. You guys have emergency fund though.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm still working on building the emergency fund. I'm trying to get to a point where I've got that 3 to 6 months. I've started to finally build that bubble up where I've got a couple months now and working on creating that powerfully. So I think it is important to have an emergency fund. Something I definitely don't see in a lot of younger folks is, having a good 3 to 6 months of your expenses set away, because you just never know what might come up in the world of your financial life, right? Both that and, to touch on that previous question, I think it is important to be setting aside and saving for the future. And it does come back to, just like Liana said, having that self-constraint and wanting to prioritize both your future and right now. That's why I found what worked for me was just letting myself have, 100, $200 a month, setting that away into a different account, and I can, save that, or I can spend that, or whatever I want to do, and just making sure you've really got your sights set on the long game, not just the next 30, 60, 90.
Yeah, that's right. So this could come from any one of you. So what financial challenges do you think Gen Z will face in the future that, from our previous generation that like they didn't, like the previous generation, they didn't really face a lot of challenges when it comes to that because they know how to work hard for whatever they want and needs. But the younger generation living in a prosperity world.
I don't know how far into the future we're looking, but even right now, I think more than probably during your generation. So Paul, I see a lot of young folks that still live with their parents well into their late to mid 20s. I've got a buddy that he doesn't really do that much for work. He works maybe a few hours a day, and uh, we were very close friends, not as much anymore, but he works like a little bit during the day, and then he goes home and hangs out at his parents' house. And he's the same age as me. He's 24, lives with his mom in the upstairs room, and he's content with that cycle. He's not saving money or setting money away. I know in his situation, he's someone that just kind of blows the cash as the cash comes in and is content living with his folks. I think we live in that kind of time where I think it's more socially acceptable in kind of a weird way, but I don't think it really is. I think it's a really weird thing where you see less and less of that drive, like we've been talking about, and people more reliant on their parents. And if parents aren't in the position to really help their kids, then you find yourself in your 20s with no idea what to do, and making bad financial decisions, taking out credit card debt, taking out loans, things like that, and not really managing yourself from the initial standpoint and in a really strong position, right? So, I definitely see where that could be impactful into the future.
Okay, yeah, I could see that too. Where, if you're talking about planning for your future, what are the top three financial goals for the next 5 years?
Well, I guess I'll jump in here. Top three goals for myself, continuing to get to a place. I'd like to have that 6 month emergency fund, since just because I'm a 1099 and it's not quite as secure as being a W-2 from an emergency fund standpoint. Getting to a place, where I'm maxing out my Roth every single year and consistently, taking that to the absolute limit and letting that compounded interest work and ride for me. And then past that, I think over the next 5 years, I'd like to continue to just save as much money as possible at a young age, whether that's opening up like a solo 401k or looking at doing like a TOD, whatever that was to look like. But setting myself up from a young age for sure.
Yeah, good, good. Anyone else, Liana?
I would think in the next 5 years feasible. And again, this is where I need to grow in my income, but I would love to buy a house. I would love to start a family. I don't know if I'm going to be ready for all of that, but I would love to head toward that direction of buying a home and starting a family.
Awesome. Yeah. What about you, Perla?
Yeah, so next 5 years, so I definitely have some career goals that will, ideally be growing my income every year, and therefore I can be saving more, really strategizing, kind of what Kai was touching on, strategizing where to put that money. And yeah, and I mean, Liana talked about, having a family and having a home, and and so also, really using discernment in choosing the people that are around me, whether that's friends, educating my family, because those guys are not going anywhere and I don't want them to. And so educating them, and and who I'm dating, to hopefully one day marry, making sure that we're really on the same page with our goals and our strategies so that we can accomplish those things together. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Ethan?
Yeah, next 5 years, kind of saying what Kai was saying, is just building up the savings to just it's in a good spot at the moment, but just to know more secure up to the 6 months is what I lean to on the savings on the 1099 side. New car purchase would definitely be in the next 5 years, and then living. Yeah, a house would be great. We'll see on the 5 year timeline on that. Otherwise, just being able to fully live and support myself, because I do live with a roommate at the moment, because rent is definitely getting up there these days. So being still the kind of going off of what Liana's definition of financial independence would be, is just being able to live fully independent, not have to take any shortcuts or anything that way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So, one piece of financial wisdom you wish to, share with other, or what you wish to know sooner for yourself.
So I would like to say something on that. When I first met with my financial coach and we looked at my finances and where I wanted to be and what was important to me, I touched on it. Family is really important to me. And when I looked at, my finances, I was paying more toward insurance on my phone than I was on my own life. And so planning for life insurance, and having even just a term policy to make sure that my family is taken care of, something happens to me too soon. I am so excited that I have, I'm already putting something toward building, something of a legacy. And even just that term policy is really, like, it gives me such peace of mind. So just getting yourself educated early is so important.
Thank you. Yeah, Kai, can you add on to that?
I can, yeah. I think there's a lot of pieces of financial advice I could get into, especially around that world of credit cards and lessons I've learned too. But I really think one of the most powerful things I've learned in the last several years was something more so in the realm of, your work ethic and your drive in that space, that Charles had shared with me, which was around the idea of passion. And I think we live in this world that's so consumed with like, you can do whatever you set your mind to, which, sure, I absolutely do agree. We can do whatever we set our mind to, but it's not so much that passion is found in whatever we set our mind to, it's actually in how we create it. And I remember just starting back when I first started, doing what I'm doing now at this point, right? And I was so unsure of myself. And so in that world of like, I always dreamed I might do this or I might do this. And, how do I know I want to create a career in this capacity? And I remember Charles telling me, like passion is just what you created. It's what you put into it. It's what you give to it. And I think that applies to that, both that drive and, how you go about creating your financial future is like finding that passion for yourself in everything that you're doing and not believing that it's some external factor that isn't tangible, that it really is self-created.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, Charles and his experience for the last 30 years, he lived and breathed in this business, in the financial industry. So his knowledge is so vast. Oh my goodness. And that's why I'm so excited that you guys are, young and taking time to learn from him, not just learning from him for yourself, but learning from him to help other people around you. So I'm just so proud of who you are. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for who you are in the world, for the clients that you serve, and for the people around you. Do you have any final thoughts that you can leave your listener from here?
Yeah, I think I do. Make a last quick comment of leaving advice to younger generation. I think the biggest thing, just basic information, is learning about opportunity costs. And I know that we talk about that in Financial Foundations course, but I think that can be applicable to anybody is for the younger generation is thinking about every time that you spend a dollar, you not lose only the dollar, but the interest on the interest. And just being more mindful with every single dollar that you do spend and thinking about, is it benefiting you in your future? Is it not? Is it worth it? And just being more mindful of your spendings.
Thank you. Yeah. Guys, let's share with the audience what are the things that you learned from Financial Foundations course, and what are those steps that you learned from?
Yeah. I think the six biggest pieces, right, are those major areas of wealth transfers that we talk about throughout the class. The whole class is structured around diving deep into those six major areas of wealth transfers. And just to kind of touch on what those are, number one, you got how you pay for your mortgage, right? Because the mortgage, that's one of those biggest wealth transfers we're ever probably going to make in our lifetimes for most folks. And it's an incredibly expensive purchase. So how we go about paying for that can have a big impact on our finances, right? Number two being how we handle our taxes. Now, everybody's got to pay taxes to some extent or another. I know nobody wants to pay more tax than they have to. So finding ways to both minimize your taxes today and minimizing your taxes in the future in a way that works for your financial life, I think that's a really big factor. Number three, how we go about funding our retirement accounts or qualified plans, 401ks, IRAs, Roths, whatever that looks like for yourself, making sure that you're optimizing that and making it work for you rather than having that money sitting around, right? Number four, how we behave around our investments. That's one of those big pieces that a lot of people tend to overlook, right? I mean, I know Vanguard, they did a study in the world of, what value adds advisors bring. And the biggest thing they found was the world of behavior around financial investments. You look at something like the 2008 stock crash where, mortgages, it was a whole disaster, right? A lot of people move to cash, but then you're locking in your loss. How you behave around that investment, it's really, really a big piece of your investing life, right? Number five being how we're paying for either our or our children's educational expenses, financing college, things along those lines, right? Because that's a very big purchase if we're helping our kids or our kids are paying for their own schooling, right? Making sure they're educated in that capacity. And last but certainly not least, but how we pay for our big major capital purchases, whether that's cars, weddings, vacations, major appliances, finding ways to either leverage other people's money or leverage our own, where we're not giving up our cash and we're maintaining that liquidity, use, and control of our capital can be a really, really powerful thing. So I think that's really the six biggest things that we're tackling throughout those 8 sessions in the FFC class, and really breaking down on an individual level in those 2 hours each week over those 8 weeks, how can you have control and how can you maintain control of your own money and how can you make that money work for you without giving up those dollars, right? So I think that's really about it right there.
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for sharing that. There you have it. Check our website out, we have the class going on soon here in April, the date should be on there. We're here to support you from all walks of life. So don't be ashamed to face the truth. And the truth is set you free. So, don't feel shame about your present, your past. Just keep moving forward. You guys are in a really good hand and you're going to be a really awesome advisor. And I already see that already. And what makes an awesome advisor is your heart. Not so much of what you know, but it's so much of what's in your heart that you are willing to give to people. And on the top of that is what you know that is a good sound advice. So I'm so grateful to each and every one of you. So thank you.